So, have you ever thought about whether there's some kind of, biological clock ticking away inside every single one of your cells? Well, there is, and today we're going to unpack the science behind it. We're going to look at these tiny little protective caps on our DNA that not only dictate how we age, but also hold the secret to one of medicine's biggest enemies. Let's dive right in.
All right, let's start with a little puzzle. Think about it. Inside every one of your cells, you've got your entire genetic code. Now, these cells are dividing constantly, making copies of that code over and over again. So what's stopping the ends from just, fraying and getting all messed up with every single copy?
Well, the answer is actually a really brilliant analogy. Just picture your chromosome, your whole strand of DNA as a shoestring. The telomere? That's the little plastic tip at the very end. Its job is super simple, but absolutely crucial. It stops the whole thing from unraveling.
And that's pretty much what a telomere does. The name itself literally means end part, and it's just a protective cap for our genes. But as we're about to find out, this simple little end part has a much more complicated relationship with time.
Right, because this protective cap, it isn't permanent. With every single cell division, a tiny piece of it gets lost. And this is, quite literally, the process of your body making a fading copy of itself. It's the key to understanding how our cells actually get old.
Okay, so why does this even happen? Imagine you're using a photocopier, but the machine has to hold on to the very edge of the paper to pull it through. Well, the part it's holding doesn't get copied, right? Your cell's copying machinery works in pretty much the same way. It holds on to the very end of the chromosome, which is the telomere, and that means a tiny piece is lost with every single copy. The result is both simple and profound. Each new cell is a slightly shorter, slightly degraded version of the one before. And here's why that matters so much. As our telomeres get shorter and shorter over a lifetime of cell divisions, the cell's ability to express certain genes starts to fade. And this especially affects the genes that are responsible for repair, which, as you can imagine, is a huge part of the aging process.
This isn't just a theory, by the way. The link is dramatically clear in certain rare genetic diseases that cause incredibly rapid aging. Children with these conditions are essentially born old, and when scientists tested them, they found they had abnormally short telomeres right from birth. The connection is just undeniable.
But what if a cell could just stop this countdown? This brings us to a really fascinating and kind of dark twist in the story. Cancer cells. They seem to have found a way to become immortal.
And this is the central paradox, right? If all our healthy cells are programmed to age and die as their telomeres get shorter, how in the world do cancer cells manage to divide endlessly, completely breaking this fundamental rule of biology?
The answer comes down to one single enzyme, telomerase. This is cancer's secret weapon. Telomerase basically acts like a maintenance crew, coming in and rebuilding the telomeres after each division. It replaces the bits that were lost, which effectively resets the cellular clock and allows cancer cells to just divide forever. A really famous and powerful example of this started back in the 1950s with cells taken from a patient named Henrietta Lacks. These cells, now known as HeLa cells, were the first human cells ever to just reproduce endlessly in a lab. And because they produce telomerase, they are still dividing today, decades and decades after they were first cultured. So, just how much have they reproduced? It's almost unbelievable. The total mass of all the HeLa cells that have grown from that one single original sample is now estimated to be over 20 tons. To put that in perspective, that's the weight of about 3 elephants, all from one person's cells. It's a truly stark demonstration of the terrifying power of telomerase. So naturally, if cancer is using this enzyme to become immortal, it begs an obvious question. Could we somehow harness the science of telomeres to slow down our own aging and live longer?
It turns out there are two main schools of thought here. The first approach is pretty direct. Let's find a way to safely boost that telomerase enzyme in our own healthy cells and rebuild our telomeres. The second approach is more indirect. It says, forget the enzyme for a second, and instead, let's just focus on strengthening our body's weakest links to stop things from breaking in the first place.
Now, looking at that first idea, some research has looked at natural compounds, like from the astragalus plant, that might boost telomerase. And while there's a lot of excitement around potential anti-aging and immunity benefits, it is absolutely crucial to state that the research at this point is completely inconclusive. We're just not there yet.
Okay, so this brings us to that second strategy, which argues for a much more practical path to a longer life. The idea is simple.
Instead of trying to manipulate our cellular clock, why don't we just focus on preventing the things that are most likely to kill us? By strengthening our weakest systems, our heart, our metabolism, our immune system, we can directly add healthy years to our life.
So what creates these weak links in the first place? Well, the research we're exploring today points to one main culprit: chronically high insulin. This is often driven by modern diets that are just packed with processed carbs, and it leads to metabolic stress that weakens systems all over the body. So the proposed solution is to tackle that root cause head-on with things like a healthy ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, which are known to help lower insulin and reduce that stress.
So ultimately, the message here is really one of empowerment. While the science of telomeres is absolutely fascinating, we don't necessarily have to wait for some futuristic therapy. The power to live a longer, healthier life might already be in our hands, just by focusing on the foundational health of our body's most vulnerable systems.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. As science keeps unlocking the secrets of aging at the genetic level, you have to wonder, will the biggest breakthroughs in longevity come from some high-tech enzyme therapy from a lab, or will they come from the fundamental choices we make about what we put on our dinner plate every single day?